Well, I can go ahead and get us started today. So thank you everyone for joining. This is our first session just to introduce everyone to some of the changes for our translational science pilot program for this year. So I'm Alicia Walkman. I'm from the Department of Pediatrics. I'm one of the co-directors of the program along with Andrew Henderson, who will be joining in a moment from the Department of Medicine. And so what we're going to be going over briefly today, and then we're going to open it up for questions, is just to review the background and purpose of this program, and then really spend some time talking about the shift in the program this year, which is the shift from translational research pilot projects to more translational science projects. So we'll go over some of the differences, as well as review logistics of eligibility for the grants, logistics of the budget and application process, and how we will do the review process. So starting with the goals of the program. So the goals are to have investigators explore and solve major challenges in translational science, specifically those that address the special health problems that we see here in our urban communities, by developing and deploying new tools, methods, and processes to expedite clinical and translational research. We want to stimulate both individual and team science in all areas of translational research related to the prevention, diagnosis, and management of human disease. And again, the shift this year is that all applications have to focus on translational science to be considered responsive to the program. So if you remember the prior RFA, it really focused on translational research projects, which was kind of bench to bedside, and thinking about, projects either with individual investigator or a group of investigators, thinking about translating findings, to humans, kind of all across the spectrum. And so that's still applicable this year, but you're going to have to add the additional component of the translational science relevance. But just to review, we will be accepting applications across the translational continuums from basic science all the way out to the translation to community. To be eligible to apply for our program, you must have a primary faculty appointment at BU, and the research has to be based either at BU, Boston Medical Center, or the VA, or any of our affiliated hospitals or health centers. We do encourage applications from early career investigators, including those, with institutional or mentored research awards from the NIH or foundations. And just to note, if you've received a previous BU CTSI pilot award, you are still eligible to apply, provided it's been at least 2 years from your previous award with evidence of productivity with the prior award. And the last point is very important. We're really encouraging interdisciplinary teams of investigators to apply for this opportunity. So as I mentioned, the big shift this year is that we are going to be requiring that applications have a translational science focus. And I'm going to be going over these 8 principles. So when you create your application, you'll have to specify which of the 8 principles, and you have to have at least one, your application sort of falls under, and how this is being addressed. And you can see at the bottom of the screen there's a website where you can read a lot more about the translational science principles, but I'll go over the basics with everyone now. So starting with the first one, the project can meet, one of the aspects of translational science is to prioritize initiatives that address unmet needs. And so this means studying under investigated areas of science or unique research challenges, such as currently untreatable diseases, that advance solutions for unmet patient or population health needs. The second one, which is a big shift for some people, is to think about more generalizable solutions. So creating a solution that is applicable to multiple disease conditions. So trying to identify, develop, and test solutions for common bottlenecks or roadblocks that can be applied to multiple diseases and conditions. So again, more generalizable solutions beyond just your specific project. And the third component, again, is an emphasis on creativity and innovation. So these paradigm shifting goals or innovations that are generalizable, innovation and research teams in terms of the partnerships and interactions that you bring together to solve the problem. Again, the next component, this emphasis on cross-disciplinary team science is very important. So engaging colleagues across multiple disciplines, fields, and professions to advance research along the continuum, and knowledge integration to bring a more holistic approach to the research with more relevant real-world applications. The next one has to do with efficiency and speed. So if you can, develop ways to accelerate the pace of its translational research, or the speed at which collaborations or teams are formed. The next one goes into these boundary crossing partnerships. So forming partnerships with various agencies, sectors to leverage various expertise, and involving impacted patients and communities. So a big part of this would be thinking about the stakeholders and the research. Could they be part of the team for your project? And the last two, one is really focused on the methods, using bold and rigorous research approaches with ambitious research goals, and rigorous and robust approaches. And the last one is focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So including diverse perspectives and research, and integrating DEIA into the development of the studies. So again, when you're putting together your application, you'll need to, mention which of these principles your application addresses and how will be a new requirement. I am going to pause there. Andy is here, and I think he's going to take over the second half of the slides. Andy, did you want to make any comment about the prior slides before going on?
Sure. Yeah, I did actually have a comment on the last part, and maybe Hubert, you could help us with this, is the priorities of DEIA, because I think the landscape has maybe changed and we may want to be careful in terms of projects that explicitly state that as a goal.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know it's yeah, I think there's a lot unknown right now, but yeah, that's an excellent point. Again, this was published kind of before the changes.
That I agree. We'll need to reevaluate that with the current environment.
Yeah. And just before I hand it off to Andy, I just want to give folks just like an example of what this might look like. I think a previous pilot project might be something where someone is looking at, say, biomarkers for a particular disease, and sort of applicable just to that particular disease, where, this one example would be, and we're working on a project right now for the ARC program, where to try to accelerate the pace in which we can study the pharmacokinetics in pregnancy by creating a new way to biobank samples to kind of move things an accelerated pace, and it could be applicable to kind of multiple different drugs. So kind of thinking sort of broader scope, bringing a larger group of collaborators together is sort of the goal with the new program. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy to go over some of the logistics, and then we will open it up for questions.
So for those that don't know me, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm a professor of medicine and virology, immunology, microbiology. And I'm the associate, director of the pilot program, working with Alicia. Also, please feel free to interrupt if you have questions. It might as well kind of address them as we're going. In terms of what we project, and again, some of this is still kind of depending on budgets and funding and what happens with sort of current proposals. We're looking at direct costs up to $25,000 in terms of budget. We are looking for research teams. Again, these are pilot programs. These are seed grants. They're short-term, one-year projects to hopefully initiate a new science project that will be competitive either in a commercial sector or leverage for other funds. So again, team science is very important. Oh, yes. Okay. Thanks. I got a flash. Hubert, are you controlling the slides? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you can use the budget or plan a budget to basically pay for most research expenses except a PI or a co-I salaries. But you can use it for salaries, for example, for a postdoc or a student or a tech. You can use it for laboratory supplies, animal costs. You just can't use it for your own salaries. Okay, next slide. The application's a pretty streamlined application. I would kind of almost think of it as an abbreviated R21 type of application. You're going to have a background, and in that background, you should be addressing things like innovation and translational science principles addressed. You should have a list of your study team members, especially key personnel. The stakeholders, this could be the community, it could be a patient population, it could be health caregivers, but you want to highlight the stakeholders that your question is addressing. As most grants, you'll want to have specific aims. If you have preliminary data, and preliminary data are not necessary, but if you have preliminary data, you want to explain that. And then the research methods and approaches. And I think one thing to keep in mind is it's a short pilot project to be done in 1 year. That's the goals of this. So make sure that your project can fit into that time frame and have an impact in that time frame. And then, how this sets you up for the future, whether this is commercialization of your ideas or and research, or positioning you to get new data or supporting data for future grants. There's going to be budget justification, NIH style biosketch, and then you can submit this electronically. Okay, next slide. So the way we review these is that your proposal will be assigned to at least 2 reviewers, sometimes more. These are usually faculty that have expertise in hopefully the area that you're proposing. If we feel like we don't have the expertise, we will go outside and ask for an outside opinion. But in general, we do have enough expertise and can avoid enough conflicts where we can do it in-house. Once the reviewers submit their comments, we have like an NIH study section where we all get together and we discuss each individual proposal. And we're looking for the kind of things that we look for in NIH scoring, like significance, innovation, approach, investigators' overall impact. But moving forward, we are going to use the more, I guess, streamlined review summary statements that NIH is using. So again, these are all still the priorities, but instead of having these 5 scorable categories, we're going to have what they call now factor 1, factor 2, and factor 3. With factor 1 being the importance of your study, significance, innovation, and the translational impact that you imagine your research having, and then that will be scored on a 1 to 9 scale. There'll be factor 2. So it looks at basically it's what formerly was the approach. And so this looks at feasibility and rigor. And then factor 3 is not a scorable factor. And this looks at investigator and environment, but this is satisfactory or not satisfactory. And if it's not satisfactory, you'll be given reasons why. I'm assuming that most of us will be satisfactory because I think we're at an excellent institution that has an excellent infrastructure and resources. So I can't imagine factor 3 will be a major driving point. So factor 1 and 2 will be scored 1 to 9. But again, still thinking about these criteria as you're assembling your grant is really important. Okay. And we're doing this because this is going to be, I think, starting the next round of study sections, if we ever finish the first round, the review format that NIH is at least moving forward with as of today. Now, whether things change, that is hard to predict. Okay. Hubert, next slide, please. And again, this is just highlighting the criteria. We really want to find looking for research that's going to have a strong translational component, that it's going to be innovative, and it's going to be impactful. I think those are the major things that we really want to emphasize here. The other thing is we do not want to have projects. We want to spend the money. We want projects to take advantage of that year. And so we don't want projects to get bogged down by being caught up in the IRB and IACOC approval process. So we do ask for projects to have approval for IRB and IACOC. Next slide. So I'm a big believer in using your community as you write these proposals, get feedback, get help with the writing. Are you communicating your ideas well? And there's lots of resources. There are grant writing and editing services on actually across the university, including in the School of Medicine. There's regulatory support. So if you're getting your IRB done and your IACOC and biosafety, you can use the different offices there. There's cores within the CTSI that can help with biostats, study design, data analysis, and as well as implementation science. There's lots of activities now around research networking, and then consulting the staff at CTSI. So that might be Hubert, it might be me, it might be Alicia. Please reach out and use us. We want to help. We want to fund every application. We want to read high quality applications, and we want to learn about your science. So these are all mechanisms that help support you as you're thinking about your projects and whether they're going to be responsive to this request for applications. Next slide. This just emphasizes that for the awards to be awarded, or the grants to be awarded, we need you to have your approvals in place. Okay. And I'm not sure, is that the last slide? Oh, and that's who we are. So we have lots of time to answer lots of questions. Yeah, anybody want to start us off? I see there's a couple things in the chat, but maybe those, okay, so that's about slides. And yes, it's being recorded and slides will be available.
Will those just be on the website? They can go to the pilot website to find those afterwards?
Yeah, we will probably find a new landing page for it since it's a newer program, but we will communicate that to everybody, and especially those on the call on that register.
I see we have a question, Joe.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for the talk. I had a question about, I guess, the second to last slide about the IRB approvals. It said it had to be 45 days before the project start. So technically, would the project start date be considered the day that we get the approval for the grant, or how do you determine what the start date is?
Yeah, I mean, usually, there's usually about, I would say, maybe like a 2-month, right, difference between the time that you get the award and when the award starts. So we recommend as soon as you submit your application to us to go ahead and start your IRP, right? So
Okay,
that's, yeah, but it won't be like the day that you hear about the award is the day it starts. I think typically it's about 2 months or so time point, but I wouldn't start then. I would start, just as soon as you're done with your application, just go ahead and put it in.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thank you.
So Gareth, you asked how many proposals. Hubert, you might be able to help with this in terms of what we're thinking of as of today, although hopefully we can support more in the future.
Yeah, as of today, we're required to fund a minimum of 4 applications. We're targeting the 25,000 range for those 4 applications. Our current budget is 100,000. That said, on the application, you could request more depending on what we receive, and we could play with the numbers game between, we could fund somebody for 50 and then the other ones for 10 or 1250 or whatever the math is. So it's depending on what's requested, what we see in applications, and how the projects look, but we do need to fund a minimum of 4. Hopefully that's clear.
I do think if we found exciting things that maybe didn't fit for one reason or another, let's say we didn't think it was translational or not, we would try to facilitate with other units as well, other pilot programs, and steer you in that way too, to try our best to support that science.
Yes, we could look to other departments, some of our departments that we've partnered with in the past. We wouldn't be able to cost share. We would, if there was a pilot program, say in the Department of Medicine, then and it was something that they felt they could take up, then we would point you in that direction, and then hopefully they would fund you completely through their mechanism.
Emily, do you mind clarifying what you mean by secondary data? Like a data set that's from outside of Boston Medical Center? Is that what you're?
Yeah, like national survey data or yeah, like other, yeah, I guess national survey data would be a good example.
I mean, I think that probably would still qualify. I think it's more thinking about if you were going to put in a grant to apply for funding to apply to do a study like at Boston Children's Hospital or something like that, that would be non-applicable. But if you were, doing analysis that would like directly impact, patients, or conditions that we see here at Boston Medical Center, I could see that that would be responsive if it met sort of the other criteria. Yeah, I think we've definitely had folks that have used large data sets in the past for pilot projects.
Hi, I have a question. So I see there's the kind of outline for the application. Do you guys use any template or kind of just we can just use the guideline, the outlines, I mean?
Where do you want to take that one? I know we used to have a template that was on the website there, but.
Right. I think she referring to the application components. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
four
the actual-
page, yeah.
Yeah, so we use WebCamp. It's a online platform that you'll add all your basic information, your demographics, and answer some questions, upload your latest bio sketch, and I don't believe they're templates, but it's pretty much the single space that's on there, including your aims and your methods.
Okay,
And
so
yeah, just follow the guidelines on the slides, but
okay, well, as long as we have all the components in there, the
Yeah.
formatting is kind of not a big concern, right?
Exactly. So I believe there's a few required documents, like the budget would be one thing, and you could do it in Word or Excel. It's fine, but obviously the dollar amount, the service and the justification of why you need that.
Emily has a DEI question, and so I think the short answer is yes. I think ultimately NIH has sort of final approval on things that we fund, and I just know from other NIH supported centers I'm involved with, this has become a bit of a problem in terms of how we communicate what we fund, and what words we can use. And yes, I think somebody put in a note that there's been a number of things and statements coming out recently about just even if DEI programs exist at institutions that could put certain projects at risk. I think, again, I don't know what any of this means. I don't know what's legal or what's not legal. And the landscape does seem to be changing quite rapidly on a daily basis.
Yeah, this might be a good point to say that so the CTSI grant was submitted in March, and it's up for review in June. However, because of the environment, the timeline has kind of changed a bit. You know, some of the scheduled reviews are delayed and they haven't been communicated. So as far as the our funding date was estimated to be December 1st. So that's what we have for now, but we're not sure because of the shifting timeline. And any grants, pilot grants that we would fund would be completely dependent on the CTSI receiving funding. And with regards to the DEI issue, I feel like we'll get more clarity once we hear more about our grant being reviewed, and we could probably get more information from our program officer at that point.
I will say that if you look at grants that have been terminated recently, they tend to be grants around, I would say probably at least over half of them around DEI and training. So global health projects. I think is, again, as long as it's based here, the PIs are based here and the overall science, I don't see a problem with global health projects being eligible. Alicia, Hubert, do you?
I agree with Andy. The one caveat is we wouldn't be able to pay expenses to outside the US. So if you're trying to pay for some data in South Africa or a community center in South Africa, we wouldn't be able to do that. Or if your budget had some travel involved internationally, then we wouldn't be able to fund that.
Yeah, thank you for the question about the co-sponsoring. I think given the current circumstances and financial constraints that all of us are struggling with, we are unsure about that piece. We have been in talks with the Department of Medicine and BMC, but again, we don't have any like definitive information yet, given I think they're all struggling with how to support their programs.
Yeah, I think we would probably refer you to those programs and to see what their budget is for what they want to do. We would definitely help facilitate that, but we wouldn't co-sponsor. It would probably be either funded through the CTSI or BMC.
So just to update everyone, we will have another session at the end of May that will be hybrid, and we hope to have some more information then to see if the timing has shifted in terms of like anticipated due dates and start dates. Again, right now we're shooting for the end of July for submissions, but again, it's that may change. So I think you can certainly start working on applications, but we will have more information in another month or so about the timeline. Megan?
Apologies if this is kind of covered in other materials related to this, but if we had like an intervention we wanted to pilot and like we utilized all of the money with like stipends or whatever, it may be in year one, but our evaluation would be like, with the 2 years following, would that be kind of suitable for this funding opportunity?
So you're going to utilize all the funds in year one. I think that's the main restriction from my understanding, but you could obviously continue to do the work and the analysis beyond that, as long as you're able to spend all the funds would be my understanding, because I think we're going to be limited just to that 12-month period.
Yeah, I guess just in terms of like what you are expecting on the kind of flip end or end of the year kind of information once those funds have been utilized, kind of what extended timeline may exist or not exist beyond the full year.
So yes, we would want you to spend your funds within the year, and our evaluation team would follow up with progress reports. I believe it's for like 3 years, so I would think you could answer those questions and let them know what you're doing, what you have planned, and kind of that timeline. And then hopefully the next year, some of those activities have taken place, and you could comment on those. And the way the progress reports work, you have what you filled out in year one, so you could always elaborate on what you did in year one and then year two, etc.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, to Hubert's point, I think most of these projects, their true impact will be realized a couple of years down the road, not necessarily at the end of the year. I think Megan's the key would be making sure you make a compelling case of how this year will help, in terms of sort of future research and your own ability to leverage support.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That's very helpful.
I have another question. So I was looking at the last year's projects, like breakdowns, like there were 60% come from basic science. Is that just because how the application were broken down, or was basic science valued more than the other ones?
Definitely no preference for either one. We kind of triaged all of the applications and actually had 2 study sections last year, but we looked at like overall top scores, to make those decisions. So I think it just, happened to be, the folks that got sort of the higher scores, but we don't purposely, kind of pick one type of translational continuum versus the other. I think it just happened to be that way in the past. I don't know if Andy, if you have any other comments on that, but
yeah, I think so when these are divided, or when they used to be divided into basic and sort of translational clinical, these are very arbitrary kind of definitions. And I think, to put it into perspective, many of the basic science proposals were like devices. Many of them were biomarker projects. So they weren't necessarily basic in this sense of, characterizing signal transduction cascades, or, this receptor and maturation of different cell types. So I think thinking of the basic translational last year, it was they were very broad. So that's one, and that might reflect the bias. And I think many of the basic science ones were actually devices and sort of surgical approaches. It probably isn't as relevant moving forward, because again, we really have to make this sort of case for translational research. So even if you're doing a basic science, it has to fall into at least one of the translational categories. Maybe it's a rare disease, an unmet need, some overcoming some barrier in terms of blocking new treatments or facilitating new treatments. So I think it's going to be very different in terms of how you pitch basic science actually in the future.
I had a quick question. I was just wondering, when we think about the budget for the CTSI grant, since it can't be used to fund research data in a foreign country, could it be used to fund a postdoc's time on the project, or another professor who's at a different institution to fund their time on this project? Is that allowed or no?
Postdoc allowed, co-I not.
Okay. All right. So only funding to cover a postdoc, not necessarily any of the investigative PIs.
especially if it's at another institution. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, using someone in a different institution it's almost like a sub account. So we would prefer not to do that, or we'd have to have some type of consulting arrangement. It becomes a little bit more intense and able to get them paid.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Other questions? Thoughts?
Hi everyone. This is Marina Malikova. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I'm apologizing because I came a little bit late to this session, so it may be a little bit repetitive of a question. I was just wondering, how much of preliminary data do you need in order to apply for the grant? If it's like translational, taking some, let's say, biomarker analysis and taking it into development of diagnostic test. Do you need like extensive research already done, or could it be just presentation of the concept? Thank you.
Yeah, so we don't require extensive preliminary data. I think a big part of it is just thinking about, this is a 1-year grant, is thinking about feasibility. Does the team have the ability to, you know, do this study in a year is really more what we're going to be looking at, rather than having very robust preliminary data, because often these grants are how you're going to fund getting that preliminary data for a larger, you know, external application. So yeah, typically it's not required to have that.
Okay, sounds great. And that's what I thought as well. Just wanted to double check. And the second question is regarding budget.
Marina, do it before we get off the preliminary data. I will point out that if you put preliminary data in, make sure it's quality preliminary data. I know sometimes people think, oh, okay, no preliminary data, and they'll throw data in and it'll be really preliminary data, and that doesn't really help a proposal. So especially maybe advice to more junior people, and this goes for any grant that you're writing. If you put bad data in, it hurts you more than acting as preliminary data. So I think keep that in mind, and assure that at least the rigor's behind the idea if you lack the preliminary data.
Got it. Right, because
Yeah.
we would have some preliminary analysis, but we may not complete within the established deadlines, like absolutely everything. And that's, I guess, like the whole point of pilot, to support it. Thank you, Dr. Henderson, for your input. And their second one was about budgetary consideration, because some of the analysis we can do here in sample collection, and some of it's more specialized. So we have IRB approval, and we have external vendor who is specializing in certain types of serological assays. Is the vendor expenses allowed?
Yeah, I think so. It's a research expense.
Yep. Good. And I feel like I'm taking too much time. Anybody has any other questions? Because I have one more.
No, go ahead. We'll charge it to the pilot grant. No.
Sounds good. So the way I read it, and maybe I'm confusing it with like the prior years. So I understand the concept of translational, when, let's say, you take something, you take it from the patient, you study it in the lab, and you're trying to like bring it back to their clinical practice, like diagnostic test. One of the ideas that we have is actually developing an app which allows us to determine the burden of patient care, whether in clinical research like clinical trial, or for the routine clinical care, looking at like social determinants of health and stuff like that. Is that something that you would think could be applicable? There is technology involved, there is an algorithm involved. Is it something that we can try for when it's like an app, but it's not, there's no specimens involved?
Yeah, so what I would do, you know, as you're thinking about that question, is just to go back to those like 8 translational science principles and just think about, you know, does it meet one of the criteria? Because most likely it does. You know, is it an unmet need? Is it, you know, like a question that, you know, just sort of go through the list to see, you know, can it generate sort of generalizable solutions that would be, and you could then apply to another, you know, disease condition. So I would go through and just think about, you know, which one it applies to, because I would say, you know, almost any project that could be modified, you know, in this application to meet those criteria. I think you should just need to carefully go through and say, you know, what can I emphasize as it meeting one of these criteria, whether it be the partnerships that you're forming, you know, to create this app, or that it's addressing a particular, you know, population within BMC that's really understudied. So I think it's just in the way that you present the work, but certainly would be eligible. The nature of the study would definitely be eligible.
It makes sense. And I think there's a lot of expectation for like patient-centric solutions, and we have very vulnerable populations. So I think it would be useful, what at least my colleagues in podiatry think so as well. But I just wasn't sure whether it has to be like really, really scientific, or could it be like algorithm based? Thank you
Oh,
so much.
Even like, community-based, it goes really from, again, T0 to T4. So anything across the continuum is eligible to apply.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. We will definitely make a run for it.
Okay. Last chance. And again, if questions come up or, you want some feedback as you start, sketching out projects and outlines and things, or maybe you're even thinking about submitting a bigger grant, at least I won't volunteer, Alicia, but I'm always happy to take a look at a grant or a specific games page and give hopefully constructive feedback. But do feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Andy and I kind of cover the whole spectrum of basic to, community engaged research. And so, if you just send an email to both of us, we can sort of triage accordingly.
Yeah, and we also have a lot of experience reviewing lots of different types of grants. So that might be helpful as well.
And then any general questions can go to the CTSI services box, which can be found on our website as well.
And thank you everyone for joining today.
Yeah, thanks. And hopefully everybody's doing well. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.